moisture is a part of almost every shot. And so if your wedge, if your wedge puts up a disappointing performance in wet conditions, if it is one of the losers on this list, yeah, man, that's a non-starter for me to go, hey, I really like this wedge, and if I play I'm gonna lose on some conditions somewhere between 25 and 65% of my spin. No, thank you. No,
yeah,
no, thank you.
Two questions for you, Tony.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. All right, everybody, how you living? No putts given. Tony, Chris, we're back. We're diving in this week. Wedge.
What episode is
Who cares? I don't. I want to talk about wedges, Tony.
You know, when we upload this, like, it asks me what season it is.
It is the season of now. We're going in depth on our wedge test, all the stuff we couldn't fit into an article online because
words, man.
We're going in depth, behind the scenes, asking questions about the wedge test. Tony, let's start with this one. Who won? Who were the big winners this year? Brief recap. Give me a brief recap.
Yeah, you're the big winner, and this is nice. I'm, shooting this at my desk and might keep doing it this way and decorate some walls around here, figure something out. But it's nice to have things right in front of me.
Just give me the damn answer.
Yeah, so we have a repeat winner, TaylorMade, the Mill Grind 3, aka MG3, or the MG 3. Won for the second time I guess it's like the first time in a row, but for the second time. Two things in a row. I'm sorry. Mill Grind won. The most consistent wedge we found based on our consistency metrics. PXG 0311 forged. Maybe a little bit of a surprise. Too much of a surprise if you're paying attention. Mill Grind MG3 again was top for our spin metrics. Number one under our accuracy metrics. I mean, just the solid all around wedge. It's crazy because, it's not a wedge. I don't think anybody talks about TaylorMade wedges a ton. Certainly not a market share leader. Creeping up. Yeah, it kind of depends where you are in the world. Creeping up. But certainly, not among the absolute leaders right now.
I mean, let's start with the winners, and then we are going to get to the losers because that's why we test, because there are winners and losers, believe it or not.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is.
So TaylorMade, PXG, and Ping, all for different reasons. TaylorMade, it wasn't that long ago, Tony, you and I were talking about this, that we felt of the major OEMs, major manufacturers out there, that TaylorMade was, lacking identity in the wedge category. It was bouncing around. We had face inserts that you could pull off and replace, and
that was a very good idea for a very narrow audience.
Yeah, and it just seemed like it lacks a clear focus or direction. Fair to say at this point that's totally changed? Do you think MG3 is now firmly, I mean, like you said, won twice in a row, which is, again, we'll talk about some of the losers here who they beat, but good heavens, is this the dawn of a new TaylorMade wedge era?
I mean, I don't know what the identity is in the marketplace and how long it takes really to establish an identity in the marketplace. But I mean, for us at this point, we're like, yeah, it's just a really good wedge. It just keeps again, 2X winner, which is something we don't see a ton. Identical performance, statistically speaking, to last year, just the same thing. We saw it again. So, I mean, if you're going to pick an identity, performance is a pretty good place to start. I mean, there's stuff I nitpick, right? I'd like to see more grinds. I want to see more grinds from everybody, even Vokian. Come on, give us that T grind. Put that on the retail market for everybody. Tony's talking about grinds again. Here we go.
Yeah, but you want more grinds, and I want more hibachi girls by my house. So great.
Yeah, we all want things. And so there are little things like that, but those type of things in the wedge category especially are going to follow the market share. So until the share is there, they're not going to significantly increase the grind options. Low, mid, high. The TW grind is, if you haven't seen it, check that out. That's one that if you're looking for something that sits low to the ground, that
who's TW? Why does he have a TW grind?
Tom
Watson.
Tom Watson could be.
Could be.
Probably not. might be Tiger Woods. Just gonna throw it out there as a maybe.
But I mean, this is big for TaylorMade, right? Like I said, 2 years in a row. I can't, I guess, overstate how impressive that is in one regard, because you have companies historically, right, that have still do dominate at retail, and I'm talking Vokey, Titleist, right? We're talking Callaway, Jaws,
Cleveland, still, yeah.
Hello.
Whether, I mean, it kind of depends, right? If your metric is units sold, it's Cleveland. If your metric is volume, dollar, excuse me, right? Dollar, it's going to be Callaway, I believe, in the wedge category, behind Vokey, both of them. But it's, TaylorMade just doesn't get that same type of consideration.
Does this change that, do you think? Does this help them, or
it doesn't hurt? It's going to raise awareness. It's again, it's one of those things that sort of like, hey, as long as I'm checking out wedges, I should probably check this one out. See if I like it, whatever it happens to be. Add it to the demo list, the fitting list, whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, I mean, good for TaylorMade. I continue to be sort of impressed by what they're doing, and it's almost under the radar, because I think most of the traditionally, historically, TaylorMade is a driver first category, I think.
They're metalwoods first.
Absolutely. And that's still true. But if you look kind of what's happened with the iron now, with the P series is, it performs well, I think. And it certainly looks really good. Like it looks the part of a serious golf club, where back in the day it was like, all right, let's put in slots and paint it red and do all of this stuff. And, now they're painting the drivers red, but that's
let's put them in lockers and send them to people. Yeah.
Well, that was years ago. And the wedge is still kind of like this under the radar thing for them.
All right. Everybody's favorite lightning rod, PXG, did exceptionally well this year, which some people are, frankly, they're going to hate to hear that, because they want to be of a position that, Cal, if we can at least, I can hate the commercials. I don't like this, or I don't like that, or whatever. But now you can't bag on performance.
No, it's so,
like
third and fourth overall, which makes sense, right? They're those wedges, the Sugar Daddy 2 and the 3S Forge, are, I believe, have the same grooves on them. Not that, they're not going to reinvent that wheel. So it makes sense. Good wedges. And if this is the one where I don't know how widespread it is. There's still a lot of that PXG hater, the idea that everything they make is sort of a step below everybody else. But I mean, it's sort of like, hey, how can a design team that was responsible, or at least partially responsible, as part of a team who designed a lot of great stuff for Ping over the years. They have guys there that helped design some great stuff for Cobra, as well as some other people they've brought in, and go, oh, well, how can those guys with what we're told is basically an unlimited budget come up with golf clubs that perform? It strikes me as odd that anyone would believe that they couldn't.
Right.
Yeah, when we go back early on, maybe Gen 1, the stuff they thought was great, drivers were too spinny. That's happened to everybody at one time or another. I mean, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, right? At one point, Titleist had drivers that were too spinny. So these things happen. The stuff is good. The wedges, obviously, very good. Nothing to nitpick. Yeah, and I like the Sugar Daddies when we got fit for them out.
I love those. I thought they were great. Yeah, good.
So, and especially the Sugar Daddy is an interesting one. It's price prohibitive. I think whatever it is for $499 is still $499. It's a big ask. Obviously the 0311 is going to be significantly less than that. But if you're looking for a little bit of a larger footprint in a wedge, and I'm not saying it's an oversized giant thing, but I compared it to my Vokeys naturally. This is a little bit bigger. The head is just a little bit bigger. So if that's something you're looking for, like that bigger footprint in a wedge, that could be an option there.
Well, and the reality is, I mean, we talk about it, price, all the time, and no matter what, people will still harp on it. But for a lot of people, let's say this, for the people that are paying $500 a wedge or $400 a wedge, whatever the case is, guess what?
They don't
flash. They don't care. Yeah. They don't care if it's $1,200 or $1,500. They might be buying 2 or 3 sets a year. They don't care. If you do care, Tony, trivia question, does more expensive gear prohibit a company from selling or a market from distributing lower price gear.
So what you're asking me is if PXG is selling a wedge for $500, does that mean that nobody else is allowed to sell one for less? Is that the question?
That's the question. Because I think
no, companies are free to sell clubs for less money than that. And what you'll find is that in every case where you have a premium price product, there are lots and lots of lower priced alternatives available. So
sometimes
as
even
we like
the
to
same
say,
line.
higher priced products do not preclude the existence of lower priced ones. So something for everybody.
And sometimes in the same line, PXG milled grind, like I said, then you have the 0311 forged, same line, like I said, same grooves, obviously very, very similar performance. Functionally, we saw this with PXG and the drivers too. And the 0211 driver outperformed for us in our tests, I believe. The flagship at that point was a Gen 4 drivers, perhaps. And it was a much lower price point product. At one point, they even dropped it like down around $200 or something like that. So
silly. I'm actually, I'm double checking the price on this stuff now because I haven't looked in a while, and PXG, with the way they tend to do things, if you blink, things will be wildly different. So Sugar Daddy 449.
Okay.
And the triple forged is 160. So
yes,
maybe
same...
a tick below the market leaders, but certainly in that ballpark.
Yep. So point being, options are out there, whether you're looking for something that's at a market average that call it 150 to 200 ahead, or if
that's fair range.
Yeah. If you're looking at, if you're willing to spend $1,200,
500, 450.
Yeah, you're willing to spend the $1,200 or $1,500 for a set of wedges because you want to know what that's like. Knock yourself out. It's out there. Like we said, people are spending $1,500 on a set of wedges, whatever.
It's like I have new wedges, only I'm poorer than I used to be. That's what
exactly. All right, last one in the winner category here. Ping. How the hell, Tony?
Oh, I knew this was coming.
This is sorcery. I don't understand it. 100%.
Funny.
It doesn't make sense. You add water. So we have our dry test. So we hit balls, they're dry. Everything's dry. Then you add water because what happens historically is you add water, launch angle goes up, spin rate goes down, sometimes significantly, and you're hitting kind of knuckleballs out there, right? That don't or can't hold firm greens, et cetera, because they have less spin. Ping, through some sort of Harry Potter wizardry stuff, we add water and they add spin.
If you really want to get super technical, we saw an increase from going from the dry spin condition to the wet spin on a 50-yard shot. We saw an increase of 2.7187%. So yes, we did see a bit more spin by the numbers. 63, 94 and change was the dry average, the wet average 65, 68, and just a little bit change still.
So that
there
defies common logic. We're not seeing that for any other
logic, but not physics.
Okay. So, but we're not seeing that, to clarify, we're not seeing that from any other wedge company right now, right? That was the only one.
No, and at some point, I'm guessing, yes, it was. There was others that were close, and you could argue. So the Sugar Daddy, for example, we saw, with the Sugar Daddy, we saw a wet spin differential of basically 3.2%. And
it went down 3%.
Right. But for us, this is a measure of consistency. Like spinning more when you're wet isn't like if we look at some of the worst clubs in our test, for example. So if that Ping had lost 60 or had gained 65% spin wet, like a massive jump, if we saw that,
that'd be terrible.
That's bad because
that'd be terrible.
You are inconsistent. So I would say from our data, what we saw is the PXG similarly consistent, the milled grind 5.58% ballpark. So a little less consistent, but still really good. But yeah, the Ping is a standout. And what's notable, as you asked, it is the only one for which we actually saw more spin in a 50-yard wet condition. That's the teaser. I'm trying to tease why we might see more spin.
Yes.
50-yard wet condition. It's the only one in the test where we saw an increase there.
Okay, so why or how? Explain this to me as though I'm a second grader. How does that happen when everything that I understand about wedge design would tell me you introduce water like on a tire on cars, right? And generally speaking, when you introduce water on a road, like your braking distance would increase, right? It would take me longer to come to a complete stop. Now this is basically saying I'm in a driving rainstorm and now my tires will actually get more grip on the road and will stop faster.
And there probably is, as you mentioned, there's actually probably a scenario in which that is technically true. So to be clear, this isn't the first time this happened. We saw exactly the same result last year. And I don't know to what extent people understand where I fit in the testing process, but I'm up here in Saratoga Springs, New York. All of the testing happens in Virginia. We have policies, procedures, right? The way we test,
Protocols, if you will.
That's the word. So we have these protocols. The guys at the test facility follow the protocols, and then they ship the data up to me, and I kind of run it through our crunching stuff and send it back. And so last year, and I say last year because it kind of gives you an overview of how we got here and answered your question. So last year we did this, and I looked at that, and I had the same reaction. So to clarify again, last year I looked at the data and saw that on our 50-yard shot, the ping, which I believe was the Glide 3.0 at the time, spun more in a wet condition. And I said, much as you said, much as, one of the first guys who commented on that this year said, this does not make sense to me.
Check your data.
Yeah. What did you do wrong? You're obviously wrong. And so last year I looked at that and I said, what the hell did we do? We're obviously wrong here. And so I called up Philip and I was like, hey man, any chance that screw some things up here? Like that we cross these over and
you added, should have subtracted, what?
Right. Yeah. Forgot to multiply by pi, whatever it is, however you get there. So I had Philip double check and he's like, no, man, that's right. And I said, okay. And then I went back and I looked at some of the stuff on my own and I'm like, this is right. This is absolutely right. There's just no way, again, in our protocols that we would sort of all of a sudden just swap the conditions of one club. It just, the protocols really don't allow for that, so to speak.
Right.
So
the data had to be right. So you're sitting there going,
data was right. And so I'm like, all right, how does this make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I, fired off a message to Paul Wood, who we had on a few weeks
ago,
right?
Players. Yep.
Yeah. VP of R&D at Ping, and said, hey man, here's what we saw.
WTF.
Pretty much. Right. As much as anybody WTF's Ping.
Right.
I'm like, hey man, like I got this thing that we see. And not only do I see it in the data, but I actually went back and checked. We did 20 testers. And I went back and I want to say it was for 15 or 16 of the 20 testers saw more spin in the wet condition. So I took that to Paul and I was like, hey man, WTF, does this make any sense? And he said, yes. Would you like me to step you through a presentation? And so, that night or the night after, we hopped on a Zoom call. And so the explanation here, and I may butcher the finer points of this, but I'm going to do my best, and maybe we'll have Paul back on to step everybody through this because there's some crazy stuff in physics. And so what we're ultimately talking about is, I guess, what can be described as friction coefficient curves. So, imagine the shape here, and we'll start with in a dry condition. And that friction coefficient is really kind of what you get with a combination of ball speed and loft. So
right.
Those two factors create a spin rate. And so, and you can think about it in simple terms of moving from like a 5-iron to a lob wedge in your bag, right? Because you have high speed, low launch, and progressively lower speed with higher launch. Mm-hmm. And that creates a curve where you kind of, in perfect impact scenarios, that's going to peak somewhere around a 9-iron or a pitching wedge is generally where that happens. And then you start, so you're climbing, and then you get this point where you start to drop down again. You with me so far?
Totally with
everybody else. So, hey, ramping up from like a 5-iron, and then as you get that
9-iron wedge,
you're right. Those coefficients.
And specifically, what's going down as we get to that 9-iron wedge
spin coefficient. So you could argue like it's going to manifest as some type of spin rate is a good way to, that's a simple way to think about it. And so again, so that's your kind of your curve with a normal finish, right? And I'll call it, hey, a standard
Average
chrome
whatever.
plating.
Yep.
With hydro pearl, the coefficients and the resulting curves are a little bit different. So if you kind of think going up like this
Yep.
maybe is a little more rounded or whatever. Paul's got the shapes in his presentation, but there is a point where those kind of cross over, very briefly kind of overlap.
Okay.
And it just so happens that that point of overlap happens right about at what for us is a 50-yard shot.
Okay.
And so we just happen to be, through no planning, just pure accident, we happen to inadvertently stumble upon the part where these curves cross over briefly and slightly. And so, yeah, it actually, with that in mind, it makes perfect sense. And then to build on that, if we were to test under probably just a slightly different scenario. So if instead of 50, we tested at say 35 and then jacked it up to 65, in either one of those conditions, the likely result is that you would see what people would expect. That is a slight decline in the wet conditions. But because we inadvertently kind of stumbled upon this point where the curve overlap, we end up in where we see just a tick more spin. And this is exclusive to the curve created by the hydro pearl finish.
Right.
We stumbled upon that weird little spot where they just kind of crisscross.
Weird little intersection. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what about this? What about so in our wedge testing, right? I mean, the thing that I always find interesting about wedges is you think about the clubs in your bag, and we'll take driver out for right now, because for most people, driver doesn't.
You do not get to take the driver out of my bag.
I'm taking it out because
damn it,
it has no speed limit. If I can hit it 10 yards further, that's great. Every other club in our bag kind of has a range, right? So if I hit, my 7-iron, it does something, in general in a 10 to 12 yard range. That's the hope. But once you get down to say 140 yards and under, I have 3-4 clubs that I might need to hit 138 different distances, right? So like let's say a 56-degree wedge for me, I might need to hit that everything from a 2-yard bump and run to 110-yard full wedge shot. What would happen if we were to take, with the ping, so we said that 50-yard area is kind of this weird, crossover curve area, whatever we want to call it. What happens if I go to kind of more of that 3/4 or full swing, if you will, wedge distance of, 80, 90, 100, 120? Would we likely see some amount of spin degradation then at that point, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And again, this is by some amount, I think it would probably still be the best in terms of preservation on the market, but you would not see spin increase in wet conditions throughout the bag. Like I said, we just stumbled upon this sweet spot, this very narrow sort of range where you get that, again, that the curves meet and actually cross a hair over. And so, just by moving the shot around, probably 10 yards would be enough.
Yep.
Either direction. Yep. You would see the expected result versus this slight little increase. So again, like I saw it, I was like, what did we do wrong?
Yeah.
And when Philip said we did nothing wrong, and then I was like, you know what? I can't trust this guy on this particular one because this makes no sense. I went back through and I was like, yeah, Philip was right. We did nothing wrong. What the hell happened? Better call Paul.
See what we found a glitch in the matrix. We bent the time-space continuum and we found something bizarre. And, but so winners again, obviously great year for TaylorMade, great year for PXG and Ping as well. A brief programming note, as there's not really a programming note. I just wanted to get your attention, Tony. People asked a question, interlude here before we move to the losers. Question: how come we didn't test 14 golf? How come we didn't test some of these Japanese companies that Chris loves so much? You have Mayuri, you got Ippon wedges, you have, like you said, 14. We did test prototypes.
Well, you said 14. I didn't say 14.
I know, but
Well, you know, like, I don't know why you're teasing me with this, because you're a guy for the
because I have an
JDM,
answer.
Japanese domestic market. What if Juicy, like, what if I took the square root of Juicy and
Mhm.
multiplied it by pi? What
Mhm.
number would I add up? What would that work out to?
14.
It would
Be close.
Okay.
Because here's why. So, little tidbit for you people out there. Yes, we want to do more testing specifically with irons and wedges and really metal woods too, as we develop things specific to Japanese, Japanese market equipment that's trying to work in the US, some with some success, some more than others. But I mentioned, we talked about Lydia Ko. She's playing Proto Concept irons. I don't know that she's bagging any of the wedges just yet. I'm not 100% sure, but
Do you know what golf ball Lydia plays?
I don't. Pro V1X.
Left dash.
Does she?
Uh-huh.
Of course she does. She's smart. Proto Concept. We'll get to them later.
You would think that, though, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's just for high-speed golfers.
Yeah. Seems to work okay for her. Get fit, people. Get fit.
There you go.
Juicy, and I'm pronouncing that in my very Colorado English dialect. Juicy, Jucie.
By the way, when I saw these in the test, again, because I don't necessarily always know exactly what's going to be in the test. When this came over, I'm like, TF is Juicy. Like, where do you find these?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We go to Walmart. Where does one find a Juicy wedge?
No. In fact, you'll pay north of $400 ish per wedge if you want expensive wedges.
So do you go to Scottsdale for them?
Yes, you do. That's where everything becomes more expensive, in Scottsdale. But Juicy. So the gentleman who was the lead designer at 14 Golf, when we did test their wedges, and if I'm not mistaken, they performed very well. I believe one, right?
14 stuff
1 year. 14 stuff
done
historically exceptionally well. So
it's my favorite of the JDM brands I've never played.
Thank you. The lead designer now, that used to be at 14, now is Juicy. Jucie is roughly translates as 14, I believe, in Japanese. The website, it's EX-Juicy, I think, or EX underscore, kind of like an ex-wife or an ex-girlfriend. Like, I'm X14 employee. So
a lot of thought went into this.
So like, if you and I started a website because we became really disgruntled down the road, and it was like X MyGolfSpy or something, like, that's what it is. So I will not be surprised at all if we see Juicy irons and wedges test really well down the road. This is kind of first rollout of some of their things.
This is the first Juicy products we've tested.
I think so. And if you want another kind of little interesting inside baseball tidbit, just for fun, look at the aesthetic on the Mill Grind 3 TaylorMade, the one that won, and look at the aesthetic on both the TT and TH. So right when I got them, I noticed, I'm like, look at this milling.
They have done some milling.
They
have milled the grind.
Yes. And again, Tony, you and I have said that, oh my God, look, these two irons look the same, blah, blah, blah. Like, get over it, people. There's only so many designs and who took this from whom and whatever. So we're not saying anything like TaylorMade copied this or that or whatever. I'm just saying, very, very interesting when you look at the aesthetic look at some of the current 14 product, but look specifically at the current Juicy wedges and the MG3 wedges. And all I'm going to say is the Juicy design was out in the sphere of the world, from what I understand, first. So just interesting. There's your tidbit, Tony.
All right.
There's our Japanese break. Let's get to the lead.
Would you say that was a bit of juicy information?
Oh, Tony, your dad show. Tony, we test equipment because there are winners and losers. Other places don't, because frankly, it's risky, right?
I don't like the word loser. I want to say,
Tony, we're the losers. The lesser, no.
I would say, where's the wedges for which we saw disappointment?
Well, who lost ground here? Because we're gonna, the ones that did really well. Here's why, etc. But who took a step back?
So what? I'm going
or disappointment. You look at it and say, man,
the one that you
I'm
can
surprised in a bad way.
Yeah, you see stuff that the guys struggle to hit a little bit, but this is a case where I go back, and maybe it's just because it's where the results are most glaring.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at those wet versus dry numbers, like you want to talk about separating your winners from your disappointing performers,
Losers.
Okay. I mean, it's whatever you call them losers. That's where the difference is made. So, like I said, I mentioned Ping, 3% difference. TaylorMade, what did I say? 5.5%. Sugar Daddy, 3.2%. Vokey.
All except
you talk about Vokey, who very quietly seems to have, in the course of at least over the last 2 generations, went to now sub 10%, which, if I'm going to draw a line, I think if you can keep 90% of your spin when wet, you're in a good place.
Okay.
So we're looking at the big OEMs and seeing sub 10% loss in spin. And then I go down the list of some of these smaller brands. Some of the stuff where I think if we're going to be, if we're being honest with everybody watching this, a lot of the design work is being done by the factories overseas. On the groove specs, they're probably not putting a lot of thought into this aspect of groove design. It's becoming more and more prominent, right? Just with Mizuno, right? Well, yeah, but we've seen like Mizuno, who we didn't test in this particular test, does excellent with spin retention now. Mm-hmm. So we've seen this go from something that wasn't even on the radar for a lot of companies a few years ago to something that we've seen significant and quantifiable improvements in. And then I look down the list at some of these smaller brands. So let me do a quick little sort on this. So I can.
Why don't you do a quick little sort on that? Because
so if we start with, we'll start with, and this is weird because one of the juicy wedges was really good.
Was that the GP or the TH one?
That was the wedge.
The TH, okay.
Yeah, but the other juicy wedge, and maybe I don't know if this is a groove spec thing, if it's, maybe a groove cutter on the wedge we got wasn't up to spec. That's something that sometimes happens too, but 25% drop in spin on the wet shot. Sub 70, 28% drop on the wedge shot. Tommy Armour, 29% drop on the wet shot. New level, 34, almost 35% drop on the wet shot. Our golf, nice. It's cool that we test these little brands for sure.
Yeah,
raise awareness, give people opportunities. It's you never know what you're going to find.
Don't know.
Well, in this case, we found a 60% drop in spin.
Oh,
yeah. So that sucks. I mean, and to put numbers on it, it went from 69.33. So we'll call that 7 to 27.7745. So it's just under 3. It's 60% drop in spin.
That's a knuckleball.
And finally, Haywood, 60. Yeah, I'm going to round it up. 66% drop in spin. And there's no all wet conditions are not the same. Right? It's not like, hey, I'm either dry or wet. There are variations of wet. I think we're probably test into what is a moderate to high degree of wet, but there is certainly if you play in the morning. Definitely this time of year for me in New York where, you're sweeping dew until at least 10 a.m. If you play in the morning, if you play in a little bit of rain, even if it's just a little bit of misty frizzle, excuse me. Even just grass, right? The blades.
I was going to say,
they contain moisture. That's why there are grooves. So moisture is a part of almost every shot. And so if your wedge, if your wedge puts up a disappointing performance in wet conditions, if it is one of the losers on this list, man, that's a non-starter for me to go, hey, I really like this wedge, and if I play I'm gonna lose on some conditions somewhere between 25 and 65% of my spin. No, thank you. No, no, thank you.
2 questions for you, Tony.
No, thank you.
No, thank you. The good, you're saying if you had to draw a line from acceptable to, boy, I'm starting to question it. If it's in the single digits, so if we're talking something that's retaining 90% or more, that it for you is like, hey, not a concern. This is pretty
comfortable.
I'm comfortable.
It's not ideal. And I think if I played in wet conditions,
well, 0 would be ideal if there was a 0 on everyone.
Right? 0 would be good. It's maybe Ping could just get, instead of a crossover, let's just flatline that curve. That's ideal. That's what we want.
Right.
But yeah, for me, I would say 5% and below is exceptional. Below 10% is certainly, I'm good with that. I'm good
When are
with
you
10%
worried?
and below.
When are you saying, no, thank you, don't buy it?
So, I mean, just looking at our data, right? The Honma, 13.2%. That's kind of the fence. I
Okay.
really love the wedge, and that's, we've had Honma wedges win before.
Yeah. EW4, I think.
Yeah.
Really
so
cool.
whatever it was,
Yeah.
that's kind of, that for me that's right on the tipping point. That's, where the teeter totter is in balance, but starting to sway. And then by the time I get to this juicy TT at 25%, count me out. And
Yep.
Haywood 66%. No thanks.
No chance.
No thanks.
Well, and what that's evidence of, and I know I'm harping on the losers, if you will, but the point,
Disappointing performers.
The point is, look how many great options there are in that sub 10% category. I mean, again, you have, go through them: TaylorMade, Ping, PXG, Titleist,
Cleveland, Callaway. And we didn't test the Mizunos this year. On us maybe, but
I'd expect
they have some new kind of stuff that's coming. But that's
historically they've done well.
We know that is a sub 10% drop in spin with that one. So you have, and I mean, look, not for anything, but if you want to look at the list of that 10% and below, and the 25-ish% and above, like, what's the difference there?
Big versus small, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
like,
if you had a case
where this is a case where it's tough for me to look at any of these bargain brands, and like, I'm all for supporting the little guy. We know Jason over at Sub 70 really well. We like Jason. Eric at New Level. I like Eric Furch a ton, but I look at this and go, no, this is a hard pass. No, thank you.
Isn't it interesting that, and we'll move on here, but side note, like, where we tend to see this big OEM versus little OEM separation, like, easy for us to understand and explain metalwood stuff a lot, where you have companies that are putting 35, 40, $50 million R&D. I mean, you have billion-dollar companies that are putting a ton
what did
of money.
TaylorMade call it on the carbon face tech? Was it the 20-year journey? How long was that journey?
Yeah, 20-year journey.
It was a long
whatever.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
we've seen in our testing sometimes that doesn't show up in as much in certain categories.
Where you're trying to get, that much, and sometimes that much is always real,
right?
But it is not discernible to the golfer.
Yep. So iron tests, like where you see, again, mentioned Sub 70 New Level. You came a couple names where it's like,
well, especially when they're these are very often the classic designs, the blades, the smaller cavity backs, for the most part, not the super high tech stuff. And from there, yeah, I mean, that technology is well established. They can compete there. They can do really well there, for sure.
But how many people would go, oh yeah, when I think of separation between big and small, I'm going to wedges, massive tech separation in the wedges. I don't know that I would have thought that initially. But it makes sense looking at the data, talking it through with you a little bit, thinking through the groove.
There's lots of things at the factory too. How often is that cutting wheel replaced between wedges? You go 5 wedges. Do you go 10 wedges? Do you go 25, 50 wedges before you replace that cutting wheel? So that becomes a luck of the draw thing. How tight are your tolerances? Can you maintain that groove radius? Again, cutting wheel, if you're not changing out those cutters, you're going to suffer. And then what have you done above and beyond the bare minimum, creating a conforming groove to deal with the realities of the moisture problem,
different conditions, etc. So I mean, to me, it's a fascinating one. I know you love wedges from the wedge grind part of it, particularly. I love the Japanese stuff. I'd love people to ask us questions, post some stuff below. But before we go, Tony, instead of mailbag today, I want story time. I want story time with Tony. And Tony, did you play any golf? I did. So I played golf this weekend, but I don't think I had nearly the same experience that you did. So I was you have 2 minutes on the clock. Tell me your stories, Tony.
So I was supposed to play Saturday and all fell apart. So I didn't. So I got everything, but my office is in pretty good shape. So most of the upstairs in the new house squared away. But anyway, so I played yesterday. Guys that I don't play with a lot in this One guy brings his buddy Zach, who's not a member, and he's like probably a 16 handicap, give or take, but he's really good driver of the golf ball. So I'll take you to number 6 at McGregor. You know it well, guys.
Yep.
If you want to follow along what I'm talking about, bring up the 6th hole on some sort of map at McGregor. It's about 540 yard par 5.
Good par.
It doesn't look like much on a map, but it is snaky tough because your landing area is narrow and you can roll into knee deep heather. You can roll down a hill. So anyway, Zach hammers a big drive, absolutely crushes it. He's up on the hill, but he rolls like he hits it far enough where he kind of runs out of the nice landing area and it trickles down into the left side rock. But I'm thinking, all right, if the guy hits a fairway wood here, he's got a chance to get on. And for context, I've been playing McGregor for like 14 years. I have had a putter in my hand for my 3rd shot 3 times. 1 conversion in 13 years. Most guys don't, not only do they not have eagle opportunities, they don't even see eagle opportunities. Like nobody with them has got the putter in their hand, but he's down here and he's got,
it is a rare bird indeed. Very.
So he's still got a good ways in, but I'm like, I don't know how well he hits a fairway wood, but if he catches one, he's got a shot. I look down, he's got his driver in his hand. He's going driver, not off the deck, driver out of the rough
on a slight downhill.
He's downhill in the rough. So he's got to kind of get it up over a hill and around and whatever. And I'm like, this guy's my partner. He's getting his stroke here. He's going to screw us. Like, this is not a good play.
He's going to make
that's my one thought. That's my first thought.
Yeah.
The second thought is, I want to see this.
This is going to be epic.
And sure enough, he takes a whack at it. Somehow he's playing a G400, maybe an LST. I don't know. It's something I have an affinity for. So I'm already thinking, well, maybe there's a chance because that was back in the day. I love that thing. So
tested well. We didn't test it off the rough on a downhill line. Whatever.
Yeah, we did not. So he hits this crazy high draw, dead center. And sure enough,
high draw.
Yeah, from a downhill lie out of the rough with a driver. And we get up, and you know how like you get to the crest of the one hill and you can kind of look down on the green. And he's like, from up there, it looks like he's 6 foot. And I'm like, oh, he's probably 20, 25 foot from past the flag. He's past the flag. And sure enough, we get up there. Right. He's middle of the green. It's kind of a front pin. He's got like a 25-foot putt. And he's standing over it. And I'm like, should I tell him? Because he's not a member. I'm like, should I tell him how quick this gets?
No. Nope.
And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to keep my mouth shut. This is his. Like, I don't want to get in his head.
One of the rare times Tony decided to keep his mouth shut. Guy
puts it right off the green. We're like, just like, I'm sitting, I'm like, trying to suck it back, whatever I can. There's just no stopping it. Like, is there anything I can press to deploy the chute on this thing? He's down. Like he's barely on the fringe. Takes the next one, maybe gets it halfway. Oh no. So now he's putting for par after being on it too. And he misses the next one like by 5 foot, like just a couple feet to the left. So on into the most impressive 2 shots I've ever seen on that hole, or at least certainly the most impressive second. And he walks off with a 6. We lost the hole.
Net 5.
6-5, lost to 5-4. And that's not even the end of my round. So
oh boy. All right.
So again, we have fall member coming up this week.
Oh, nice. Who's your partner?
So I didn't have one. I'm like, it's one of these things where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to play because I got stuff to do. If something comes up,
are you out of friends, Tony?
I really just. Yeah, I think it's probably because I tell people what I think of their golf ball too often. Maybe it's like, well, what do you think of this? I'm like,
it's shitty. Don't play it.
Yeah. So one of the guys I'm playing with, I know him a little bit, played with him a couple times, but he's having a terrible round. I don't know what his handicap is, but he's going to shoot over 100. It's just like, you're at the point where like, yeah, unless I finish birdie, eagle birdie, like it's just, we have cleared the 100 threshold. So he's playing in the
north of 100.
Oh yeah. No way to deploy the chute on that either.
No.
He's playing in the member with my buddy Matt. And like you can see, he's getting to the point of frustration. It's late in the round. It's just not what he wanted it to be. He's already lost $20 to me, or at least 15 at that point. And so like all of a sudden he just looks at me and was like, hey, he's like, if I bail on the member, can you play? Or can you play? He's like, it's like, I can't do this. I need to take 2 weeks off. I don't want to play. And I just looked at him and laughed. Didn't think anything of it. We're walking to the last hole and I get a text from his partner. He's like, hey man, can you play this weekend? I was like, oh my God, this dude just dropped his partner on the 17th hole the weekend before. So I was like, it's going to get me in trouble. Yeah, I can do that. So
hey,
ready to go.
The things we go through, and we've all been there. We've all wanted,
I just saw a guy 4-putt for a 6, and then another dude just dropped his partner in the interest of his sanity, which I think
like, hey man,
that's respectable.
I need a break. This game is about to break me. I need a break. I got to step away for a minute. It takes a strong person to do that. We've all been there. So shout out to, what's his name?
Chris.
Makes
Taking
sense.
a break.
Chris, best of luck. Get back soon, buddy.
And Zach on one hell of a 6.
And Zach, great 6 net 5. Appreciate that.
It hurt to
I'm sure you guys have some stories like that or wedge questions. Find us out on the interwebs at GolfSpy T. That's Tony at GolfSpy C. That is me. Until next time, we out.
No, thank you.
Oh God, that's sorry.